There is a quarantine sector of the galaxy that no ship enters. For 10,000 years, the elders enforced a single absolute law. Do not wake the sleeping giants of Sol. But desperation breeds arrogance. One commander ignored the warning, unleashing a terror the universe had completely forgotten. The holographic star map in the center of the command center was bleeding. Entire clusters of stars in the Perseus arm flickered from a serene blue to a violent, pulsing red, indicating sectors lost to the relentless advance of the enemy. They called it the Scourge, a hyper-aggressive, parasitic armada that consumed everything in its path. The Galactic Coalition was losing. Commander William stood at the edge of the projection, his hands gripping the metal railing until his knuckles turned white. He was a veteran of 80 campaigns, a decorated leader who had never known the bitter taste of utter defeat until now. Behind him, the heavy doors of the war room slid open, and the rhythmic, heavy footsteps of Chancellor Gregory echoed across the polished floor. Gregory was one of the elders, a member of the founding species that had governed the coalition for millennia. His face was lined with centuries of weariness, his eyes carrying the weight of ancient secrets. "You are staring at the dead zone again, William," Gregory said, his voice a low, warning rumble. He pointed a long, weathered finger at a dark, empty patch on the edge of the Orion spur. "Avert your eyes. There is no salvation there. There is an entire solar system, perfectly intact, sitting behind a stasis barrier of your design," William countered, turning to face the elder. "My scouts have picked up energy signatures, massive ones. You told us Sol was a graveyard, a dead system ruined by a failed species. But graves do not radiate terawatts of latent fusion energy. Who is in there, Gregory?" The elder's posture stiffened. "Ghosts, demons of a bygone era. Leave it be." "My fleets are burning," William shouted, slamming his fist onto the console. "We have lost 7 billion souls in the last solar cycle alone. The Scourge does not negotiate. It does not pause. If there is a weapon behind that barrier, if there is an army, I demand the right to use it." Gregory sighed, a sound that seemed to carry the dust of 10,000 years. "You do not understand what you are asking. Long before your ancestors learned to harness atomic fire, the inhabitants of Sol, the humans, were traversing the stars. But they were not like us. We build to survive. They built to conquer. They are apex predators who weaponize their own suffering, turning every defeat into a terrifying leap in technological evolution." "Then they are exactly what we need," William interrupted. "Warriors." "They are not just warriors, William. They are an extinction event waiting for a trigger," Gregory said, stepping closer, his voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "When the Coalition first encountered them, we tried to integrate them. But their ambition was boundless, their industry completely unchecked. They did not just want to join the galaxy, they wanted to reshape it in their image. When we tried to sanction them, they nearly shattered the Coalition. We didn't defeat them, Commander. We barely managed to trap them in a localized temporal stasis field, locking their entire home system out of sync with our universe. We did not lock them in to punish them. We locked them in so the rest of the galaxy could survive." William stared at the dark patch on the map, his jaw set. "If we do nothing, the Scourge will consume us all. I would rather risk the wrath of humanity than guarantee the death of the Coalition." "The Council has spoken," Gregory said with a finality that brooked no argument. "The Sol barrier remains untouched. Anyone who attempts to breach it will be branded a traitor and fired upon by our own defense grid. Focus on the front lines, Commander. Let the sleeping giants lie." When Gregory left the room, William did not look back at the map of the losing war. He pulled up a secure, encrypted channel to his flagship, the Vanguard. He had made his decision. The elders were paralyzed by ancient fears, but William was a soldier dealing with present realities. Within the hour, William and a loyal crew of mutineers severed their ship's tracking beacons. The Vanguard, A heavy dreadnought bristling with the latest coalition plasma weaponry slipped into the slipstream undetected. Their destination was the forbidden coordinates of Sol. William knew the risks. He knew he would face a court-martial or execution if he failed. But if he succeeded, if he could leash the legendary monsters of Earth and point them at the Scourge, he would be the savior of the galaxy. The journey was tense. As they dropped out of slipstream space on the edge of the Sol system, the sheer silence of the void pressed in on them. There were no navigational beacons, no deep space outposts, just a vast, cold emptiness. "Commander," spoke up Lieutenant Arthur from the sensor station, "we are approaching the perimeter of the temporal stasis field. The energy readings are staggering. It's not just a barrier, it's a localized reality anchor. It's keeping the entire system frozen in a microsecond loop." "Can you break it?" William asked, gripping his command chair. "With the Vanguard's main deflector array and the zero-point reactor pushed to maximum, I can create a dissonance wave," Arthur replied, his hands flying across his terminal. "It should shatter the anchor. But, sir, if the Elders are right, whatever is in there has been trapped for 10,000 years. They might not be happy to see us." "We are giving them their freedom," William said firmly. "They will owe us. Fire the dissonance wave." The Vanguard shuddered violently as its massive forward deflectors hummed to life. A blinding beam of pure, concussive tachyonic energy shot from the ship's bow, striking empty space. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the fabric of space itself seemed to crack like tempered glass. A shock wave of chronal energy washed over the dreadnought, knocking out secondary power and sending the crew stumbling. As the visual sensors recalibrated, the dark, empty void of the Sol system was suddenly replaced by a sight that made William's blood run cold. He had expected to see a ruined, desolate Earth, perhaps a few scattered orbital stations frozen in time. Instead, the tactical display instantly flooded with millions of active contacts. The space around the third planet was entirely choked with orbital infrastructure, massive, brutalist shipyards, sprawling defensive rings, and energy grids that eclipsed the light of the sun itself. Earth was not a world. It was a fortress. "Commander," Arthur stammered, his voice trembling as he stared at his monitors, "I'm reading ships. Thousands of them. Their energy signatures. They don't match any known coalition database." "Sir, the smallest vessel out there has a power output greater than this dreadnought." Before William could process the sheer scale of what he had uncovered, the Vanguard's communication console shrieked. It wasn't a standard hailing request. It was a brute force override. The human systems had seamlessly bypassed the dreadnought's military-grade encryption in a matter of seconds, forcing a visual feed onto the main bridge screen. The image resolved to show a brightly lit command deck, utilitarian and stark, cast in deep grays and harsh white lighting. Standing in the center was a human. She wore a crisp, midnight blue uniform devoid of the ostentatious metals common in the Coalition, bearing only a single, silver starburst on her collar. Her hair was pulled back tightly, and her eyes sharp, calculating, and piercingly calm, locked directly onto William. "I am Admiral Catherine Brooks of the Terran Systems Alliance," she said, her voice carrying a clipped, commanding authority that required no translation. "You have violently disrupted our temporal boundary, fired a high-yield weapon at our perimeter, and entered restricted Terran space. State your identity and your purpose, or you will be reduced to component atoms." William swallowed hard, trying to project strength despite the overwhelming display of force outside his windows. "I am Commander William of the Galactic Coalition. I have disobeyed the direct orders of the Elder Assembly to come here. I have shattered your prison. I have given you back the universe." Catherine's expression didn't change. She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "Our prison? 10,000 years ago, the Elders trapped your species in a stasis field," William explained, leaning forward, trying to leverage his position. "They locked you away because they feared your potential. I have come to offer you a deal." The Coalition is currently facing total annihilation by a parasitic swarm we call the Scourge. We are losing. I broke your chain so that you could fight for us. Serve as our vanguard against the Scourge, and I will personally ensure the Council pardons your history and welcomes you back into the galactic fold." Silence hung in the air for a long, agonizing moment. Then Admiral Catherine Brooks let out a short, sharp breath that sounded suspiciously like a laugh. "Commander William," Catherine said, stepping closer to her own screen so her face dominated the Vanguard's bridge, "you seem to be operating under a severe historical misconception. The Elders didn't put us in a prison." William frowned, confusion breaking his composed facade. "What do you mean?" "Chancellor Gregory himself told me they locked you away." "They built the temporal anchor," Catherine corrected, her tone turning dangerously cold. "But they didn't trap us inside it. We told them to build it. We handed them the blueprints." Arthur looked up from his console, his face pale. "Commander, I've managed to run a deep scan of their chronal variants. They haven't been frozen. The temporal field. It wasn't keeping them in stasis. It was accelerated." William's heart dropped. "Accelerated?" 10,000 years passed out there," Catherine said, gesturing vaguely to the stars. "But inside the field, we manipulated the temporal flow to our advantage. We've had nearly 50,000 years of uninterrupted technological development, free from the petty squabbles, politics, and slow bureaucratic decay of your coalition. We saw the limitations of the galaxy, and we decided to lock our door and build our strength until we were ready to claim the stars on our own terms." William took a step back, realizing the catastrophic magnitude of his error. He hadn't woken a sleeping beast to fight a war. He had kicked open the gates of an empire that had spent 50 millennia preparing for conquest. "You didn't break a prison, Commander," Catherine whispered, a predatory glint in her eyes. "You just knocked on our door while we were busy, and we absolutely hate being interrupted." "Sensors are going wild," Arthur shouted, panic finally breaking his discipline. 3 of those dreadnoughts are breaking formation. They're powering weapons. Sir, the energy spikes are off the charts. It's a completely new paradigm of physics. They're drawing power directly from the vacuum. Evasive maneuvers. Reroute all power to the deflector shields." William roared, the illusion of control completely shattered. "We cannot engage them, Commander. We are outmatched 10,000 to 1. Catherine's voice cut through the chaos on the bridge. "Power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. You are going to give us the tactical data on this Scourge you mentioned, and the current coordinates of the Elder Assembly. It seems humanity's isolation is officially over." William watched in horror as the colossal Terran warships casually matched his dreadnought's evasive maneuvers, dwarfing his vessel entirely. He remembered Gregory's warning, the desperate terror in the Elder's voice. They are an extinction event waiting for a trigger. William closed his eyes as the human boarding alarms began to blare. He had pulled the trigger. There was no deafening explosion, no screaming of torn metal when the humans breached the Vanguard. The transition from a secure, autonomous coalition dreadnought to a captured vessel happened with terrifying, surgical precision. The ship's primary power grid simply died, plunging the bridge into crimson emergency lighting. 10 seconds later, the reinforced blast doors of the command center dissolved. They did not melt or explode. They simply ceased to possess molecular cohesion, turning into a fine gray dust that drifted to the deck. Through the lingering particulate stepped the Terran boarding party. They did not move like soldiers fighting a war. They moved like exterminators clearing a nest. They were clad in bulky, matte black powered armor that drank the ambient light. William recognized the brutal efficiency of their design immediately. There were no glowing visors, no exposed joints, just seamless composite plating. Etched faintly on the shoulder pauldron of the lead soldier was a faded, archaic corporate logo and the words, "Lockheed Martin, Advanced Exotactical Division." It was a relic name from a forgotten era of Earth's history, somehow surviving 50 millennia to forge the armor of these titans. "Weapons down. Do not attempt to interface with your consoles. A synthesized, flat voice boomed from the lead soldier's suit. Lieutenant Arthur, shaking uncontrollably, slowly raised his hands and stepped away from the sensor station. The rest of the bridge crew followed suit. The human Marines secured the perimeter in absolute silence, their weapons compact, blocky rifles humming with confined plasma trained on the coalition officers. A few moments later, the remaining dust cleared, and Admiral Catherine Brooks stepped onto the bridge. She wore no armor, only her immaculate midnight blue uniform, a testament to her absolute confidence in her Marines. She was flanked by an intelligence officer carrying a sleek, transparent datapad. "Commander William," Catherine said, her boots clicking sharply against the metal deck. She stopped a few feet from him, her piercing eyes analyzing him as if he were a biological curiosity. "You have a remarkably robust ship, archaic, painfully slow, and your firewalls are practically begging to be bypassed, but robust." William swallowed his pride. "We built the Vanguard to withstand the Scourge. It is the pinnacle of coalition engineering." "Let us see about that," Catherine murmured. She gestured to her intelligence officer. "Major Harrison, access their central databanks. Pull everything they have on this Scourge and the current coordinates of the Elder Assembly." Major Harrison stepped up to Arthur's abandoned console. He didn't even bother plugging in a device. He simply laid his hand flat on the terminal screen. A web of silver, liquid-like microcircuitry spidered out from his glove, bleeding directly into the glass. Within 3 seconds, the coalition dreadnought systems chirped in submission. "I have their core memory, Admiral," Harrison reported, his eyes scanning the data, scrolling across his own datapad at lightning speed, downloading the tactical logs of the Scourge front lines. Running algorithmic comparisons now. William watched, helpless. "You do not understand what you are dealing with, Admiral. The Scourge is not an empire. It is a biological contagion. It eats starships, consumes planets, and repurposes the biomass. The Elders have tried everything. We cannot negotiate with it. If you do not help us, it will eventually wash over your system too." Catherine raised an eyebrow. "Commander, the Terran Systems Alliance has spent 50,000 years simulating every conceivable threat in this universe, and 3 parallel ones. We do not fear biological contagions. We sanitize them." "Admiral," Harrison interrupted, his voice suddenly sharp. "You need to see this. The genomic sequencing and algorithmic behavior of the Scourge entity. I've run it through the historical archives. It's a match." Catherine's expression hardened. She stepped over to Harrison and looked at his datapad. For a long, agonizing minute, she said nothing. The silence on the bridge was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the Terran Marine's armor. When Catherine finally looked back up at William, there was no smugness left in her eyes, only a cold, terrible fury. "Commander," Catherine said, her voice dropping an octave, resonating with dangerous calm. "Tell me exactly what Chancellor Gregory told you about the Scourge's origin." "Its origin?" William stammered, caught off guard. "No one knows. It emerged from the deep void beyond the Perseus Arm 3 centuries ago. The Elders claim it is an extra-galactic anomaly." Catherine let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "An anomaly. Of course." Major Harrison project the data. A holographic projection flickered to life in the center of the bridge, overriding the Vanguard's projectors. It displayed a terrifying, shifting mass of red biomechanical tendrils, the Scourge. Next to it, a strand of intricate, glowing green code appeared. "Look closely at the foundation of the biological matrix." "Commander," Catherine instructed, pointing at the projection. "Notice the artificial splicing? The silicon-carbon hybridization protocols? That is not an alien anomaly. That is a targeted, self-replicating, terraforming nanite swarm." William frowned, staring at the code. "I am not a geneticist, Admiral. What does this mean?" "It means," Catherine said, leaning in, "that 3,200 years ago, your precious elders realized that our temporal barrier was slowly generating a localized gravitational anomaly. They panicked. They thought we were trying to break out. So, they decided to discreetly exterminate us. They engineered a highly aggressive biomechanical virus designed specifically to eat through chronal energy barriers and devour the biological matter inside. They launched it at the Sol system. William's breath hitched. No, the elders govern the coalition. They swore an oath to preserve all life. They swore an oath to preserve their own power, Catherine snapped. They launched their little bioweapon at us, but they grossly underestimated the density of our temporal shield. The virus hit the barrier, failed to penetrate, and the chronal shear mutated its base programming. It ricocheted off our defenses and was hurled deep into the Perseus arm, completely unchained from its master protocols. Arthur gasped from the corner of the room. The Scourge. It's not an invader. It's a weapon. The Elders' weapon. Exactly, Catherine said, her eyes blazing. Your elders created the monster that is currently eating your galaxy. They couldn't control it, so they lied to you, threw billions of your soldiers into the meat grinder to cover up their mistake, and blamed it on the void. You've been fighting their garbage, Commander. William fell back against the railing, the revelation shattering his entire worldview. Everything he had fought for, the billions of lives lost, his friends, his crewmen, all of it was the result of a botched assassination attempt by the very leaders he served. Gregory had not warned him away from Sol to protect the galaxy from humanity. Gregory had warned him away because if the humans woke up, they would find out what the elders had done. My gods, William whispered, staring at his trembling hands. What have we done?
You.
Catherine straightened her uniform, the cold, pragmatic commander returning. You were just a pawn, Commander William. But your usefulness is not quite over. Major Harrison, transmit the tactical data to the Armada. Prepare the TSS Retribution and the TSS Oppenheimer. Split the fleet. Splitting the fleet, Admiral? Harrison asked, his fingers flying across his datapad. Yes, Catherine replied, turning toward the blasted doorway. Half the Armada will jump to the Perseus arm. We are going to clean up the Elders' mess and exterminate this scourge. The other half is coming with me to the Coalition capital. It is time. The Terran Systems Alliance had a word with Chancellor Gregory. As Catherine turned to leave, she paused and looked over her shoulder at William. You wanted to leash the monsters of Earth, Commander. Congratulations, the leash is off. But you don't get to hold it. The space above the Coalition capital world of Ethelgard was usually a serene, glittering expanse of defensive orbital platforms and grand, sweeping space docks. Today the sky was bleeding. Chancellor Gregory stood in the grand amphitheater of the Elder Assembly, his ancient eyes fixed on the massive overhead viewing screens. The entire assembly of 300 elder delegates was in absolute uproar. Sirens wailed throughout the subterranean bunkers, and frantic aides rushed across the marble floors, clutching datapads that projected nothing but catastrophic failure. Status report, Gregory roared, slamming his staff into the stone dais. Chancellor, a panicked defense coordinator shouted from the communications pit. The primary defense grid has been completely bypassed. They didn't even fire a shot, sir. They just... us. Folded space. They bypassed the outer system monitors and manifested directly in low orbit. Gregory looked up at the screens. Hanging silently above Ethelgard, blotting out the sun, was a Terran super-dreadnought. It was a jagged, brutal spear of black metal, thousands of kilometers long, dwarfing the largest Coalition stations. Flanking it were hundreds of smaller, equally menacing cruisers. They sat in perfect, motionless formation. Hail them, Gregory demanded, his voice trembling despite his efforts to maintain control. Demand their surrender. Threaten them with the primary planetary defense cannons. Sir, the defense cannons are offline, the coordinator replied, his voice breaking. Their targeting computers are displaying a single repeating message. Checkmate. Before Gregory could issue another order, the central holographic projector in the middle of the assembly floor violently flared to life. The grand seal of the coalition was shattered, replaced by the stark, silver starburst of the Terran Systems Alliance. Admiral Catherine Brooks appeared in the projection. She was standing on the bridge of her flagship, Commander William standing quietly in the background, a silent testament to the coalition's failure. Elder Assembly, Catherine's voice echoed through the amphitheater, amplified to an ear-splitting volume that forced several delegates to cover their ears. I am Admiral Brooks. As of 3 minutes ago, the airspace, digital networks, and planetary defense grids of Ethelgard belong to the Terran Alliance. Any attempt to launch a vessel or power a weapon will result in the immediate vaporization of this hemisphere. You arrogant primitives, Gregory spat, stepping toward the hologram. You violate our space? We are the governing body of the galaxy. We contained you once. We will do it again. You contain nothing, Gregory, Catherine replied, her tone dripping with contempt. And your galactic governance is officially terminated. At this very moment, the other half of my armada is systematically wiping out the scourge in the Perseus arm. A murmur of disbelief ripped through the assembly. The scourge? Wiped out? The coalition had spent 3 centuries and countless lives failing to even slow it down. I have authorized the use of localized singularity engines and antimatter lances, Catherine continued calmly, as if discussing a pest control procedure. The biological contagion you engineered, the one that you lost control of and allowed to consume a third of the galaxy, will be completely eradicated within the hour. We are currently sanitizing the infected sectors. Gregory's face went completely pale. The assembly erupted into chaos as delegates turned on the Chancellor. The secret of the scourge's origin was the most closely guarded truth in the elder ranks. To have it broadcasted openly destroyed their absolute authority in an instant. You lie, Gregory shouted, though his voice lacked its former thunder. Commander William, Catherine said, stepping aside slightly. William stepped into the holographic field. He looked down at the Chancellor, the man he had revered for his entire life, and felt nothing but disgust. It is the truth, Chancellor. The Terran data is irrefutable. I have seen the base code. You created the scourge to murder humanity in their sleep. Instead, you created a monster that murdered our own people. You are a traitor to the coalition. The commander is correct, Catherine interrupted, taking center stage again. But we are not here to wage war against the citizens of the coalition. We do not punish the sheep for the sins of the shepherd. She leaned forward, her eyes locking onto Gregory's through the immense distance of space. We are here to assume administrative control of this galaxy, Catherine declared, her voice ringing with the absolute certainty of a species that had conquered time itself. The Elder Assembly is hereby dissolved. Chancellor Gregory and all complicit members of the High Council will be taken into Terran custody to stand trial for crimes against the galaxy. You have 10 minutes to surrender yourselves unconditionally. If you do not, we will surgically extract you from that building, and we will not be gentle about it. The hologram flickered and died, leaving the assembly in stunned, terrified silence. Up in orbit, aboard the TSS Retribution, William stared out the observation window at his home planet. It looked so small now, so vulnerable under the shadow of the Terran guns. He had gone to Saul looking for a weapon to save his people. He had found something far more profound and far more terrifying. Humanity was not a mindless, raging beast, as the elders had claimed. They were something worse. They were apex administrators, a hyper-advanced, militaristic society that had spent 50,000 years perfecting the art of absolute superiority. They were cold, they were efficient, and they were undeniable. You did the right thing, Commander, Major Harrison said quietly, stepping up beside William. Did I? William murmured, watching a squad of Terran dropships detach from the dreadnought's underbelly, descending toward the capital like a swarm of dark angels. I saved the galaxy from the scourge, but I handed it to you. Harrison offered a slight, grim smile. We don't want to destroy your people, William. We just want to make sure nobody ever interrupts our peace and quiet again. And we find the best way to ensure peace is to be the ones holding all the guns. William watched the dropships breach the atmosphere. The age of the elders was over, drowned in the very lies they had spun to protect their power. The galaxy had a new master now. They had ignored the warnings. They had awakened humanity, and humanity was never going back to sleep. The universe learned a terrifying lesson that day. Never trap a predator. Give it time to evolve, and expect it to forgive you. The Terran Systems Alliance didn't just save the galaxy, they claimed it. If you loved this epic tale of humanity's ultimate comeback and galactic domination, smash that like button. Share this story with your fellow sci-fi fans, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more incredible HFY stories.